Okay, proceeding on, let's do the terminology review for Lesson 2, Fair Housing Issues. Major terminology in this lesson. We talked about the Americans with Disability Act. Again, it prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in employment, transportation, public accommodation, communication, and government activities. Of course, what's important for us is as real estate brokers, is the public accommodation section of the ADA. Blockbusting, illegal act. We talked a little bit about that. Also called panic peddling. Panic peddling is really what happens when you go block to block, knocking on doors, scaring people that their property values are going to be diminishing because of the neighbors across the street. That's really panic peddling. Blockbusting is when they end up listing with you and now you've put your for sale sign up and you've sort of broken or busted the block. Civil rights, of course, we talk about Civil Rights Act. These are the rights guaranteed to all people under the Act, and they're constitutional in nature and statutory nature. Civil Rights Act of 1866, that's the big one, the first major one, and of course that protects those against discrimination based on race. Always the most important protected class, if you will. HUD, governmental agency that enforces the Federal Fair Housing Acts. Disability, remember, physical or mental impairment is considered a disability. So you're protected under both types of disabilities, physical as well as mental impairment. Discrimination is when you treat somebody unequally because of their being a member of a protected class. And of course, that would violate federal and or state fair housing laws, and again could result in your being taken to a fair housing court. Fair Housing Act, there's a number of Fair Housing Acts. We kind of lump them together. We don't really care about the titles or the years they were implemented. We just lump them all together and say there are these federally protected and instigated acts. Familial status, protecting the family, particularly the family that has children under the age of 18. Illinois Human Rights Act, again, that's our state Fair Housing Act. It extends from the federally protected classes and adds some. Marital status is one of the additional protected classes under our Illinois Human Rights Act, which isn't found under the federal acts. Those protections, marital status protection, is not found under the federal acts. Military status, again, a state protected class. Basically, that's protecting people who are serving on active duty from being discriminated against. Sometimes landlords, when finding out their tenant or prospective tenant is active military, might not rent to them because they're afraid they may get called up and then have to leave midterm, and maybe they might miss some rent while they have to re-rent the place out. So they don't rent to active military. That would be a violation of the Illinois Human Rights Act. National origin, order protection status we talked about. Public accommodations we talked about. That's any public arena. We protect the disabled in any of those areas. Reasonable accommodations, that's what landlord has got to make. That comes on landlord's dime to make reasonable accommodations for the disabled. Reasonable modification, also they have to make these structural changes. So reasonable accommodation is where landlords are making changes in their policies, if you will, rules and regulations to accommodate the disabled. Reasonable modification is where the landlord is making actual structural changes to meet those that have disabilities, to make the housing so that they can enjoy the housing, if you will. Redlining, illegal activity. Lenders used to do this. They would take a big red line, tell all their loan officers, and draw a red line across a map of the community and say, any properties on this side of the red line, we won't lend any mortgage money to. So if buyers come in looking for properties in that area and they want to borrow money, we will refuse to lend them money. Sexual orientation, gender-related identity. It is not the physical sexual attraction to a minor by an adult. That isn't considered sexual orientation. Doesn't include that. That's illegal. Steering, channeling people to various areas based on their race or religion or ancestry, national origin. A tester, a person who works for a fair housing organization. Could be a church, could be a separate organization. Some of the law schools have fair housing centers where they will employ testers to go out into the real estate community and see how they're treated. And unfavorable military discharge, again, a protected status with the Illinois Human Rights Act. This protects individuals who have been unfavorably discharged from the military from being discriminated against. So a landlord couldn't say, I see you've been unfavorably discharged from the military, therefore I won't rent to you because, I'm a staunch, military supporter, and somehow you've got this strike against you, so this dishonorable strike against you, so I'm refused to rent you. Can't do that in Illinois. Okay, continue on to the key concept review for lesson 2.